it's with great pleasure that I introduce Dhruti Shah and Dominic Bailey, who are going to talk about Is There a Book in This?
Just check. I'm sharing my screen. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. So this is our book, and our book, after working on it for quite some time, came out last year, bang in the middle of lockdown. So we had a lockdown launch, but that meant sort of no cheese and nibbles in a bookstore, no signings that you might expect, and not even the opportunity to sort of wander around Waterstones, hanging out in the business section to see who might be buying it. But the journey started what seems now quite a long time ago, and we'll take you through sort of how the idea for the book came about and to actually getting a physical copy that people can buy.
It's called Bear Markets and Beyond, remember, when you're looking through them, but it did actually start out as an idea out of basically tackling a bit of false imposter syndrome. So I turned up in the business unit in 2016, important year in business, Brexit, for example. I didn't have a business background, and I'd hear in meetings things like, you know, Hammond is a hawk, the bull markets, the bear markets. You've got Facebook, which was a very famous unicorn at that point. And so this was a way to sort of navigate a world that I didn't fully understand. I'd been hired as a really good storyteller, but not somebody who understood economics or business, but was able to make it more relatable. And so what I would be doing is trying to find out, is there actually something in it? Is there something that can help me find out how to understand this world? And I would do a few pencil sketches on a commute. Here we've got the first picture that sort of ever came out of this idea of bear markets and understanding the business world, and it's a unicorn, it's a pencil sketch, and you've got again Mark Zuckerberg wearing a hoodie, because he was very famous at that point for wearing a hoodie. So very simple sketches. I would ask around and say, look, I know there are a couple of animals, but are there any more? And we have this huge spreadsheet. It's evolved considerably in the last sort of 5 years, but here there was the initial table that we created. And I approached Dominic back in the day when you could see on Instagram what your friends were liking and who they were liking, and his pictures are way stronger than mine, so fair play to him on that. And I thought, okay, definitely got an idea, definitely need to do something with it. Now what?
So I'm a journalist and not an illustrator by training at all, more of a doodler, but I do work with some great designers and illustrators on the BBC News graphics team, so I had picked up a few tips from them, taught myself Illustrator and how I could transfer my sketches to from sketches to actually digital illustrations. I started doing a few from the phrases that Dhruti suggested, like fat cats and tigers, the tiger economy, and narwhals, the Canadian unicorns, mainly because they were animals that I like drawing. We put the idea towards a World Service news competition internally as a business bestiary, as we were getting these animals together, but that didn't work out for us. So we pitched the idea to the online business unit as an A to Z of business animals, and they went for it. So we ended up with 26 phrases of animals, cheating slightly with X by using IBEX, which is the Spanish stock exchange, and also a mountain goat. So we got the full 26 from bear markets to unicorns. So having done the 26, and the online piece did quite well, it's quite popular, and people would say, oh, you can make a book out of that. But we didn't have any idea at all about how you would approach or tackle making a book. So there was some interest from people via the BBC, but it turned out they were after something that was a lot different to our idea of what the business bestiary would be, and eventually said no, as mainly their marketing team couldn't really classify it. Was it a serious business book? Was it a children's book? Because of the look of the images. But we were convinced that there was something in it, and people said they liked it. So we sort of kept in the background putting these animals phrases together, and we'd already had some but we thought that was it. We thought we had to get a few more. We only had 26 from the A to Z, but for a book we'd need about 100. So we started collecting more, and we already had some pretty obscure phrases like yak shaving. But then Dhruti would come up with something else and say, oh, there's this phrase called vomiting camel, or the skunk works. So we'd be trying to create illustrations to go with these phrases. And I'd sort of approach it as the catchphrase, you know, say what you see. So I'd have an image of a bear, put a flat cap on it like a market trader, and then some fruit and veg, and there you have it, bear market. Or we'd use a play on words. So I don't know whether you could guess what the common theme is for these. These are all bonds. Bulldog bonds from the UK, kangaroo bonds from Australia, and kiwi bonds from New Zealand.
But you know, it's all very well saying, oh, we've got this idea, bearing in mind it took us 4 years from idea to actual product in shops with a lot of obstacles in the way. And that's where I think you're probably quite interested in how we got to that point. So we had our spreadsheets. It wasn't just one, we had multiple ones. We had cloud storage, which was diminishing each time, because when you're having these illustrations, they do take up a lot of space, and when you're coming up with lots of ideas, they also take up a lot of space. And also we had no connections, so you're basically starting from scratch. So if you've already got connections in the publishing world, that's amazing. If you're like us and don't, then it's like being back in journalism, you know, when you're a cub reporter and you're having to be like, who knows somebody who's at least going to sort of take a chance on us. And with us, because we clearly don't like to do things in a conventional manner, we decided to follow that path, the unconventional path. So I had actually previously worked in publishing back when I was a very young person, and I knew that they have slush piles, and normally the editorial assistants are in charge of the slush pile. So that's an unsolicited offer to a publisher, and they were the gatekeepers. So what was happening is that I think we were putting our idea forward, very much believing in it, knowing that having that A to Z already be out there, that we've got schools, we'd seen school teachers, we'd seen economists, we'd seen data journalists, we'd seen families say this is a really good idea, that they wanted it, but then realizing that we didn't have that pathway that we needed. So what we did was, you know, approach as many people as we could. We discovered that if we wanted to get it in schools and libraries, which is all, you know, that has always been the dream, that we had to get it traditionally published. That was much better in terms of the distribution network because it was already set up. So although we did have an offer from a crowdsourcing publisher, for us, when we realized the cost involved and the expense and the fact we don't have rich friends, we realized that for us it wasn't going to be the option for us to pursue. So we were writing emails, I was writing letters, we were trying to find an agent. People would come back to us and say, no, actually, it's not for us. You need to come back with something more conventional. But the thing is, there is nothing like this on the market. And as Dominic was saying earlier, when Penguin were potentially interested, they want to know what they can compare it to. You can't compare our book to anything because there is nothing out there in terms of being a primer guide for people of all ages, all genders, all whatever, but being an introduction, but also being something for people who are already immersed in the field of business to have fun with. So what then happened is that, fair play to Dominic, he had to I encouraged him, he had to learn the art of book design. So, you know, what we've got, and I've got it actually next to me, is a prototype that we printed out, and that we were saying this is the sample. We were applying for economic book grants. We weren't eligible for that because they didn't know whether it was an economics book, whether it was a business book, what exactly it was, because it's funny. We were advised to try for academic publishers, but it wasn't quite academic enough. It's a very popular culture book, you know, explaining what skunkworks are, the history of it, and have our beautiful pictures. So what then happened is that we had a conversation. I had a conversation with somebody I knew who sort of mentioned about having a product but not having an agent. They then introduced us to their agent, who's a super agent, who took a look at what we had. Wasn't for him, it's absolutely fine, but then gave us yet another name. So that power of names is super important. And then, yeah, again, we broke and we basically printed out our prototype, sent it to Portico, which is our publisher, managed to get it right in front of them. So bypassing that slush pile, bypassing the fact that we didn't have an agent, got in front of somebody's face for a coffee. And then because I'm so blatantly shameless when it comes to good ideas, it was like, look, me and Dominic are brilliant. You need to know about us because of X, Y, Z. This book needs to be out there because of X, Y, Z. So it's all about having a business case as well, because they're going to invest money in you. And also learning about foreign rights. Foreign rights are really important if you're thinking about a book. And basically they saw this book pretty much made in their hands, as you see. A deal was struck. The Beeb then found out, so it got a little bit more complicated. But we were starting to be on the way to hopefully getting a book.
And then lockdown struck. So we were pretty much in, the contracts had been signed and we were in the proofing stage. So we had a sort of date for publication. And as people were being furloughed from the publishers, they asked if we could send them a cover and suggest some different covers for the book. So I didn't really know much about what they wanted for the front of the book, but they seemed happy with the suggestions. Because generally speaking, book publishers, they'll come up with the cover themselves because they have to get the right. It's an art in itself, I think. So we managed to sort out the contract issue. So if you're a staffer of a big organisations, it's worth knowing or checking first what you're allowed to do outside of your organisation and what you're not allowed to do. So we joined the Society of Authors, who helped us in looking over contracts, which was worth it for us. And also, as we didn't have an agent, who would probably have usually tackled those sort of things. The delay for the pandemic also meant that we could get a 2020 animal in, which is this guy, the hamster calf, which is German for hamster purchase, which describes panic buying. So filling trolleys with toilet paper and flowers, as we all remember, seemed just like a hamster stuffing its cheeks with food to eat later to the Germans. So we squeezed that one in and had the added advantage of making it current.
But the other thing is, one thing we've definitely learned is it's not just about having the product, it's about marketing, and it's about making sure people are aware of the fact that you've got this book and encouraging others to spread the word. So in this instance, because we were in the pandemic, so we couldn't have that book launch that we really would have wanted to have. It was then trying to find a partner. So we were able to team up with PressPad, an organisation that's clearly for journalists, and they helped us by doing a Q&A event. Every time I had anybody get in touch with me or post anything about the book, that we would sort of share it and say, look, you know, other people are interested in this, it's important because of this. It meant being shameless about approaching people on Twitter and LinkedIn and anywhere else and saying, we have this, we think it'll be of interest to your audience, and also thinking beyond the usual audience. So this isn't a book just for business people. This is a book for families, for pretty much anybody. We got in Money Week, we got in a Daily Mail, our marketplace, but it's about maintaining momentum. So that's super important. You might have had your publication date, but you need to continue to tell people. So hence why we're here. But also, you know, I ended up on word of mouth on Radio 4. I'd once been told that I was too common for Radio 4, that I'd never make it on there. But you can't limit yourself. And, you know, I ended up having a discussion. It involved a lot of my personality. So that's the other thing. You're not just talking about your book, you're also giving yourself away as well as the person behind the book. We even wrote to Sir David Attenborough, and he wrote back, which was unexpected. But the fact is, if, you know, the King of the Jungle himself is interested in a book, then we know nature specialists will be interested in it. And that helped us target others. And then the other thing that, you know, we really sort of persuaded our publishers to do, because again, we're not like famous at all. We're not like super celebrities or anything. We're just people with an idea. And that in a way can be a disadvantage, but it also means that you don't know what your limitations are. We've been, so we persuaded our publishers to put us in for the Business Book Awards. We're now a finalist, find out in May. And on publication day, we got to #1 on our categories on Amazon. Yeah, you know, so we can classify ourselves as bestsellers. In fact, that's happened now 3 times, purely because we keep pushing it as a really, really important product. So you do have to think about marketing and how to tackle any audience that you can that will be interested in your book. We're also in Creative Boom, which is for designers. And we just are looking for anybody who wants to cover our book, because it gives them content, but also gives us coverage and access to a different audience.
So that's it really. We've it's quite a rapid rush through how we got here, considering how long it's actually taken. But we stuck to our guns in believing sort of in the book itself and how we wanted it to be and how we thought it would look. And it's out now, and it's in the States at the end of the month. So thank you.
Buy it.
What an impressive story. So how many animals did you end up including in the end?
130, I think, in there.
Wow.
But not all of them have pictures, because
Okay.
you can't put pictures in, but I'm pretty convinced it's 130. But we have animals in our spreadsheet that aren't in there, including ones that would be of interest to the Hacks and Hackers audience. For example, platypuses. We'd love to be, is that the plural of it? I don't know. We'd love to put a platypus in, because that's like a journalist stroke technical technologist, and that's what a lot of us are, but it just didn't make the final cut in the end for this edition.
Great. We have a
not
question.
quite enough for a second book, I don't think.
yeah, the sequel. We have a question. So what did you learn from making the book that you'll take back to your journalistic work? I mean, tenacity. This clearly shows tenacity. Just we're not giving up on this, and you're going to do it all yourself.
To be honest with you, I think it's, okay, do you want to go first, Dom?
No, for me it's practical skills, and I think so. I am getting to grips with Illustrator a lot more than much better at it than I was 5 years ago. That's for sure.
I mean, for me, at the end of the day, it's not just the book, but it's just like you said, the element's super important. When I first came up with the idea, so before I'd even sort of gone to Dominic, there were people who were like, this is a really stupid idea. Out of all of the ideas you've had, this is probably the most stupid. And I'm like, I could take that as an insult, or I could take that as a compliment. And because I knew that there were other people who would be interested in this, for me, the whole journey, the fact that, you know, we've made it a success, despite the fact all the obstacles have been against us. Like, you're not really supposed to get a book deal when you're not famous. You're not supposed to really get a book deal without an agent. You know, if you're not an expert in this field, and we've never said that we're business experts, we're animal business experts, but we're not business experts. It's not supposed to happen. But the thing is, if you really believe in your idea, and if, you know, talking about that idea of journalism, this is what we deal with, our currency is ideas, then you can make it happen. And if it's not for one editor, doesn't matter. You figure out who it is for, as long as you've got the audience in mind. And that's what it's always been about, financial literacy with a twist. It will happen. It's going to be blooming exhausting, but it will happen.
Okay, we have 2 questions. I'll read them both out, and you can take. Oh, do we have 3 questions? Okay, you can choose 1 or 2 of them. So, is somebody who remembers having a conversation with you a while ago, Mike Wendling. Having seen things up close, what's your impression of how the biz of publishing has changed in the pandemic? I think that's for you, Dhruti. And then we also have, how did you balance your book writing lives and your day-to-day work? That sounds like a challenge in itself. And any other specific challenges or advantages that come from including so much illustration in a book? So I think the third question is probably for Dominic, but let's start with you, Dhruti.
Okay, so yeah, Mike, can I just give a little sort of shout out to Mike? Mike has always been a fan of the idea from the beginning, so respect. And he also has an amazing book out. But in terms of the idea, to be honest with you, the pandemic has been a real eye-opener in terms of you really have to rely on yourself in terms of getting stuff out there, because the fact is, we were just excited to get one publisher interested in our book, to be perfectly frank with you. And we also thought that in publishing, that they do a lot of the work and they do a lot of telling people about it, and they can't, because they're also resource poor, to be perfectly frank with you. In terms of how the pandemic's affected things, people got furloughed. The fact is, Dominic had to create our book cover. I did a video for the BBC years ago about the art of book cover design, and I saw how many people are involved in book covers. And the fact is, here you've got Dominic, who is not a book cover designer, but now is, because he's had to become one. It shows how publishing is now something for, on one hand, it's something for everybody, but at the same time, it's something for everybody if you can learn the skills and you have the chutzpah to take on the deal, as it were, and do it all yourself. As long as you can get a deal, that's the key thing. So that would be my personal experience with it, that it's changed. On one hand, it democratizes stuff because people can go for the deals, but at the same time, it's not so democratic because there's not that many staff around in which to tell people about your book.
Dominic, I'll let you choose your question to answer.
In terms of time, it was fitting it in as and when. I'll be wandering around with my laptop to sort of children's gymnastics rehearsals, sitting in the corner trying to draw an eagle or something like that. But the advantage of the book having more illustrations is probably having to write less text, which Dhruti appreciated, because some of the descriptions are quite bare and, excuse the pun, but and you know, there's not, I mean, some of them are very old phrases and have been around for a long time, and there are probably theses on them, but some of them are more obscure and haven't been used that much. But also, I think the illustrations give it a much wider appeal because, you know, in the end of the day, it's a book about economics, which is not the easiest subject to approach or most appealing for lots of people. But you could put this in front of, you know, sort of teenagers, younger children, someone who's sort of starting off late, you know, sort of adults looking at, you know, starting economics studies, and you don't have to have a sort of economics degree to read it. You can take away as much or as little as from it, and the illustrations help give a sort of reminder, as it were, to sort of, you sort of might forget exactly what a vomiting camel is, but you'll know it's something to do with the graph that's going in a particular direction. So there'll be little triggers like that, which I think is what the appeal of having more illustrations in the book.
I'll just quickly jump in terms of both questions as well. As Dominic said, we're actually going to be talking to primary schools. Again, it's an economics book, but they don't need to understand the exact words. It's about not being scared of business. That was always the intention and why we sort of really pursued this. And if you've got a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, and we have tested it on 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds who want to look at the pictures and want to look at a picture of a guinea pig director. So in the book, for example, the guinea pig director is in a film director chair. So it's very literal in that respect, but do get the book. We included that because even though it's quite an old term and it involves, you know, a director basically putting in a guinea and sort of stepping back, it's interesting when you look at it in terms of like non-executive directors nowadays. Now, a 5-year-old doesn't need to know that. What they do need to know is that they don't need to be scared. If they sort of hear parents talking or they then decide that they want to be, oh God, I can never, entrepreneur, you know, at 11 or whatever. That's why the illustrations are so super important, and having that, because it also made us stand out in terms of there not being a product like what we've created out there at all. In terms of the balancing, yeah, oh my gosh, we all did in our own time, and it was evenings, and it was you know, getting up early, and it was, as Dominic said, squeezed in sessions, and it involved looking through the OED, but the thing is, it was fun. So when you're a journalist and you know you've got that curiosity, it was being able to utilize that, even though it was in our unpaid time, as it were. We didn't get any time off to do this. We didn't get any leave or anything. We literally did it because we enjoyed it, and we knew that there was going to be an end product somehow. So that's what made it not boring or difficult or scary. I mean, we'd sometimes get fed up with it, because I'm sure you all have this. When you work on one project for such a long time, there are moments when you need to take a break from it. But that's, I think, how we got the balance, you know, that it was fun.
And that's a great place to leave it. So very inspirational, 2 incredibly inspirational talks. Thank you to everybody involved.